Okay, we're recording. Welcome everyone to this special edition of Go Vote Omaha, a candidate forum for Douglas County Commissioner District 7, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. My name is Bridget Claiborne, and I'm the Vice President for the League, and I will serve as the moderator for this forum. The League never supports or opposes political parties or candidates, so we present this forum solely for voter education. The format is as follows. Each candidate will get a 1-minute opening statement, followed by questions prepared by the League of Women Voters. Each candidate will answer every question and will have up to 90 seconds to answer. And following the questions, each candidate will then have a 2-minute closing statement. We'll alternate speaking order throughout the forum. Our timekeeper is League member Kathy Bass, and she will signal candidates when they have 30 seconds of time remaining and when to stop speaking. And before the forum, the candidates flipped a coin to determine the initial speaking order, and I will introduce them in that order now. There are 2 candidates running for Douglas County Commissioner District 7. They are Mike Friend and Joe Giles. So we'll start with the opening statements, and Mike, you're up first.
Thank you, Bridget. Like she said, my name is Mike Friend. I'm running for Douglas County Commissioner in District 7, and I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity tonight. It's an honor, and Ms. Giles, I want to thank you for getting involved and taking this path just like I have. It's been interesting. I can guarantee it will be quite civil tonight. I can guarantee it. There's a reason I'm running for this office, and the reason is because I've been trained to do it. I spent 7 years in the Nebraska legislature, and quite frankly, I feel like I can help. I feel like I can help the county. I feel like I can help the city and all the cities within Douglas County. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. I think I can add some value to this discussion, and then hopefully, eventually, the county board here in Douglas County. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Joe?
Thank you, Bridget. And I would also like to thank the League for this opportunity to talk to voters in District 7 about issues related to Douglas County, and to thank my opponent, Mike, for joining me in this conversation. I have called Omaha home for the past 16 years. I've initially came to work in the city as a television reporter and anchor for Fox 42 News. After that, I've worked in public relations, and now the last 5 years I've been working in public policy. My current role as policy and training director for the Coalition for a Strong Nebraska is centered around helping nonprofits engage in the decisions that elected officials make at the state level, focused on stopping poverty. So I know how the decisions elected officials make can impact all of us. I'm not a career politician. I'm a nonprofit leader who cares about the future of Douglas County, and I want to bring my background, my leadership, and my skills to this role as a public servant. There are some important issues for our county to think about. Its response to COVID-19, juvenile and criminal justice reform, mental health, and property taxes. I also serve,
Thanks, Joe. Joe, we'll start with you for the first question, which is, what do you think the 2 most important issues facing Douglas County are?
Great question, thank you. I would say that the top 2 issues are COVID-19 and its impact on our community. I'm the only candidate that has formal public health training from UNMC, and so I think that that's going to be really critical as our county continues to recover. As I've talked to hundreds of voters in my district, I had a conversation with a gentleman who's an essential worker. His wife is also an essential worker at a grocery company in town, and listened to their concerns about safety for their family and for their community. So it's clear that Douglas County can allocate more resources to help as we recover with healthcare and with contact tracing, so that we can get our schools reopened. Another big issue, I think, is our juvenile and criminal justice reform. There's been a lot of conversation about what happens inside the building and expanding with juvenile detention. I think there are behavioral health care needs, mental health care needs, and family-based services that could be helpful in this regard. It's good for us as a community to think about early prevention, and it's also great for taxpayers, because if we can solve some of these concerns on the early end, then it can save taxpayer dollars moving forward. So those would be two that I would suggest: COVID-19 and criminal and juvenile justice reform.
Thanks so much, Joe. Mike?
Thank you. That a couple of good points that Ms. Giles made, and those were important points. I'd add to that. I'd make it a different point of view a little bit. The state of Nebraska is 8th in the nation in property tax burden, and the county board has a certain taxing authority, and I know what that taxing authority is. I spent 7 years in the legislature studying that taxing authority. I spent 2 years on the revenue committee understanding and implementing a lot of that taxing authority. The county board needs to be held accountable for that taxing authority. And I think the county commissioners mean well, but we need transparency. So we need better understanding of the taxing authority that the county board has, and we need transparency as to how the county board actually operates. Let me give you a quick example. The whole Juvenile Justice Center and the situation that Ms. Giles was talking about, that was ran through. There should have been a vote of the people on that whole thing. We're talking over $100 million of infrastructure spending that the people should have had a say in. And I understand what that say should look like because I understand the taxing authority of a county board. Something's got to give. 8th in the nation in property tax burden, and I think we have to address that. If we don't address it in Douglas County, I don't think the rest of the state will address it either.
Thanks so much, Mike. We'll start with you for the second question, which is, do you think that the Douglas County Health Department has all the funds they need to deal with the COVID-19 crisis and future public health situations?
Under these circumstances, with what we're dealing with right now, I think that there's a little bit of an unknown. We're going in peaks and valleys. We're going up, down. I would say the answer to that question is, at the moment, probably 3 months from now or 4 months from now, we don't know. And I think appropriate planning, a key understanding of what that planning should look like, and that comes with that taxing authority that I was talking about earlier. We need to understand how to best spend that money, where it's going to be most efficient, and then be able to react as quickly as possible. Government doesn't react fast. I'm a small business owner. I react pretty quickly. I was a state legislator. I had to react pretty quickly in that regard. I think I can react pretty quickly on a board with 6 other people. And I think that understanding that taxing authority and understanding how to plan and actually move things into the appropriate buckets, how to disperse that money, how to appropriate it, is going to be pretty important because this is a moving target. And I think one of the other things that I would add, what goes along with that is if we do have a greater impact from COVID, and I think Ms. Giles would probably agree, and you two would as well, and most of the citizens of Douglas County would, we could have another rough ride here in the next 3 or 4 months. If we do not plan from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint, we don't deal with that, we're going to be lost. We won't know how to do. We won't know how to deal with it. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Joe?
I would say at the moment, there is adequate funding to deal with COVID-19 response. Back in March, the federal government allocated $166 million specifically to Douglas County in its CARES response to look at the needs that are happening. So as I've been watching the county board meetings every week since I've announced I'm running for this office, I've watched how the board has tried to allocate funding in different pots. Dr. Adipour, who is the health department director, came before the board perhaps about a month ago, outlining some of the expenses that her department has faced from March until roughly the end of June. And so there's adequate funding there. The challenge is that per the federal government guidelines, this money has to be spent by the end of this year. And so we know that this CARES Act money ends there, and we're going to have to look at ways to continually meet the needs of the health department into the future as we continue to see the impact of COVID-19 in our community. One of the things I'd like to look at is making sure the health department has enough staff to do the contact tracing. I've recently heard from a teacher who in her school, the nurse is spending all of her time not handling nursing issues, instead doing contact tracing. So clearly there isn't enough staff in the health department to be able to provide that very important service that's now falling on school nurses and school secretaries. So we need to be able to have the health of our community at the forefront.
Thanks, Joe. Joe, we'll start with you for this third question. In light of recent protests about the police, would you support shifting any resources from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office to mental health services or other programs?
Thank you for that question. I believe and continue to support law enforcement. The individuals that are working in the Douglas County Sheriff's Office are great individuals and are really providing a valuable service to our community. I would not support shifting funding away from the Sheriff's Department. What I would support is, if it was possible from a budgetary standpoint, to provide separate funding for mental health and for social workers. There's been a pilot program that's happened in other counties that have been able to partner social work and behavioral health specialists with law enforcement officers to go on calls with them to provide that service. I think it's too much to require our law enforcement officers to have to do that type of service along with what they're trained to do and what they're experts in. So I think having a partnership and providing funding so that that can work as a best practice would be the better solution here.
Thank you. Mike?
The answer to that question is absolutely not. Most people that are talking right now in our community and don't understand the job that a law enforcement officer actually has. And I don't want to get too down in the weeds here, but one of the things that that Joe pointed out, and it was a great point, those services, those particular services, the added services and the social services have to be provided. And those partnerships and interlocal agreements can be provided. But do not mistake for 1 second, do not mistake and do not try to merge the whole idea of law enforcement and what these men and women are actually trying to do on a daily basis and what social workers do. There's a totally different mindset. There's a totally different training mechanism in place. I think that law enforcement officers require consistent added training. I think that they should have more training, how to de-escalate situations, how to work through situations in a clearer and more effective manner. But for the life of us all, do not conflate and do not conflict the whole idea of merging these two types of things together. I think that they're distinct, and I think that they're implemented in distinct fashions. But I agree with Joe. I mean, I think that the interlocal agreements and partnerships with private entities in the community could be very effective and should be utilized. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. For the next question, Mike, we'll start with you again. What do you think the most important role of a Douglas County Commissioner is, and what makes you qualified for that role?
The most important role, it's pretty generic and it's pretty high level, but it's ministerial, it's administrative. What Joe and I are going through right now is not what you saw last night. It might not be what you see in a legislative race. A lot of the issues that come up are not necessarily, I wouldn't say that it doesn't ever happen, but they're not necessarily ideologically based. These are administrative jobs and they're ministerial. I mentioned taxing authority earlier. That's an important aspect of it. I mentioned transparency a little bit earlier. The transparency of that taxing authority is very important. Fiduciary responsibility is very important, but all of those things relate to a $400,000 budget that Douglas County is essentially trying to manage. That requires a great deal of administrative discipline. It requires a great deal of ministerial discipline. The 2 years I spent on the Revenue Committee, the 2 years that I spent on the Judiciary Committee, and the 4 years, actually a little longer than that, as chair of the Urban Affairs Committee, I understand these issues. I understand the disbursement and the administration of those funds. And I think it's going to be really important to keep that in mind when you're on the county board. The stuff doesn't have to be as visceral as it's been. People get ideological on that board, and frankly, just keep in mind it's administrative. It needs to be kept tightly in that regard. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Joe?
I think that one of the primary roles of a county commissioner is administrative. You look at the budgets of all the various departments and approve those. You look at interlocal agreements and how you can reduce services through effective partnerships. As a nonprofit executive, I know how to stretch very generous and precious grant dollars and donor dollars for efficient and effective operations. And so in my leadership roles as a board member, that's our fiduciary responsibility for an organization, is to make sure that there is financial stability and growth. So the scale may be different, but the work is the same. So my approach would be looking at line by line expenses, expenditures, revenues, and to look for efficiencies at the county board level. I think it's an important step to take a nod from what the appropriations process is at the state level. There is a public hearing where each department comes in and talks about what the needs are of that department and can ask questions. So I think that would be an appropriate type of process to instrument at the county board level so we can be more efficient with the taxpayer dollars.
Thanks so much. Joe, we'll start with you for this last question, and then we'll go into closing statements. The question is, do you agree with how the CARES funds were appropriated by Douglas County? And if not, what would you change?
This is a great question. As I've been watching the county board meetings every week, I agree that some of the funding has gone in the right places. I would have liked to seen them take a very different approach. Early on, other counties were more nimble in how they reacted and pulling together a group of community members, different industries, small business, nonprofit, philanthropy, and really discussing what the community needs are, and then using that feedback to determine allocation. I would have liked to see more funding go quicker to our nonprofit communities. Individuals, organizations are doing that really difficult and increased need service provider work. So we've seen an increase in food assistance. There's an issue with evictions happening, social services, utility assistance. So I would have liked to see the county board move quicker to get those funds out the door and to reduce some of the application processes to make it easier for people. Many people have not had to ask for help before and have not had to interact with government in this way. So I think that that would have been a better use of funding. I also think the priority should have been on needs instead of wants. And I'm glad that towards the end, we were able to give some money to the city of Omaha, particularly to get the libraries opened. In my role as oh crap, I couldn't say the rest. All right. I'll get
That's
to it
okay.
at the
We had multiple signs going up.
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much, Joe. Mike, do you agree with the CARES fund appropriation? And if not, what would you change?
Well, I change a lot, but let me keep this pretty simple. I agree with a lot of what Joe just said. Oddly enough, the funny thing is we do agree on things once in a while. 85% of Douglas County is the city of Omaha. The city of Omaha was absolutely decimated. The revenue in the city of Omaha was absolutely took a gut punch. Now, Joe had mentioned this. The city of Omaha did get a considerable amount of money, but I don't know, A, what took so long, and B, why we were really, dealing with what we were dealing with as far as why there was the confusion. To me, the need was the city of Omaha. And that should have been the first thing that was actually addressed. After that, you start picking and choosing things around the county that would have been really important to make sure that they're funded appropriately and deal with the issues that COVID actually caused. Could have been OPPD, it could have been MUD. There are things that OPPD and MUD are doing for their ratepayers, and some of those care funds maybe could have been increased in that regard. I don't know. I have to dig into a little deeper. But the fact of the matter is 85% of Douglas County is the city of Omaha, and they got hammered. So I'd address that a little closer, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks both of you for answering all of those questions. We're going to head into closing statements. And since we started with Mike for the opening statements, we'll start with Joe for closing statements.
Great, thank you once again for this important conversation about county issues and for the work that the League does in our community. If it's okay, I would like to use some of my time just to, as a follow-up to that previous conversation. One of the reasons why it took so long to get the money to the city of Omaha was how the guidelines were instructed from the federal government, because the city could not use it for revenue replacement. And a large part of the city of Omaha's budget is police and fire. So it was trying to figure out how to allocate the money to the city of Omaha to replace the revenue loss, but also fall within the revenue guidelines. So that was one of the reasons why it took so long. And in my role as board president for the Omaha Public Library Foundation, I was working behind the scenes with the OPL trustees and having conversations with county commissioners about reimbursing the city of Omaha so that we could get the libraries open, which is really important to our city. So I'm already doing this work as a nonprofit leader, a mom, a wife, and a community and church volunteer. I enjoy thinking about public policy all the time in my day job and working to provide common sense solutions that impact all of Nebraskans. A little bit about myself. My husband and I have been married for 23 years. We have a son who is a fourth grader in an OPS school, and we have a golden doodle named Hooper. I have a broad skill set and understanding of community and state issues. I'm not a career politician. I am just a person who believes that I can make a difference in our community and our county as it relates to mental health care, COVID-19, criminal justice reform, and property taxes. I would love the opportunity to serve my community in this role. I love to talk to voters, so you can always reach me at votejoegiles.com. I ask for your vote in the general election, whether you're voting by mail now, if you're going to vote in the coming days, or in person on November 3rd. I am committed, collaborative, and ready to serve District 7. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Joe. Mike, you are up.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters again. And Joe, I want to thank you. I appreciate it. The sunlight it keeps changing on my face, you guys. Sorry about that. Look, I'm an Omaha native. I've been here for 53 of my 58 years. I went to Creighton University, got a bachelor's degree in mass communications. I'm a small business owner. I'm an agent with Farm Bureau, business development professional. Spent 7 years in the Nebraska legislature, as I pointed out. Represented Northwest Omaha District 10. I've got a wife and 4 kids. I've got my own League of Women Voters. I've got 3 daughters and a wife who vote constantly, and I always have to check with them before I do anything. So look, I was appointed by Governor Dave Heineman back in 2009, to be the first director of the Office of Violence Prevention. And I learned a lot there. I learned a lot in the legislature. I learned a lot from my business background and experience. I want to bring all that experience to the county board. And I think I can help. That's why I'm doing this. It's not to keep working for certain types of change or anything else. I just think I can help. And I think that if I get there, I think collaboration is always important. Communication is always important. Understanding what the other person is saying. Diplomacy, being able to work across party lines, if you want to call it that. I've done all that. And frankly, I think that I'm pretty easy to get along with, and I understand the issues. I know business. I know the way money should be distributed at a government level. I understand the transparency of government, or what a transparent government should look like. I understand the taxing authority of that county board, and I understand what fiduciary responsibility looks like at the level of political discourse. So I would appreciate your vote. It's votemikefriend.com. And I can only tell you that I think I really appreciate this time. It's really been enjoyable getting to know Joe a little bit too. And good luck to all the other candidates out there and good luck to the League of Women Voters. Thank you for the time today.
Thanks so much, Mike. Well, this concludes our forum for Douglas County Commissioner District 7. The League thanks both of the candidates for their time participating in our conversation. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Bridget Claiborne, and I'm reminding you to inform yourself about the issues here in our city and to learn about where candidates stand on issues when you go to fill out your ballot. Vote by mail ballots were mailed out earlier this week. So just a reminder to get those mail-in ballots back to the election commissioner before November 3rd. And remember, there's drop boxes if you don't want to put them in the mail. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.